Welcome back. Well, here in Canada, only 8% of the top executives at public companies are female. It's not close to 50%, but it's the highest it has ever been in 8 years. That's Jay Rosenzweig is the founder and CEO of executive recruitment firm Rosenzweig & Company, and he's been tracking the data, and he joins us now. And also joining us is Nyla Ahmad, Vice President of Local Digital at Rogers Ventures. Nice to see you both. Thanks for coming in.
Good to be here.
Jay, let's start with this report that you put out, because you said you put it out with guarded optimism. We've seen the numbers, 8%, so it's a little bit better than the 4.6% when you started issuing this report, but it's not nearly as high. Why is that?
Well, if one were to talk about discrimination as being severely prejudicial treatment of women in the workplace, I think we're past those days, which is a great thing. But there are these systematic barriers that I think are still holding women back. The boss wondering if they should give this critical project to a woman because she has 3 kids at home. Well, you know what? Men have 3 kids at home, too. That woman has a husband who also has childcare responsibilities. The Rolodex is still alive and well, where it's easier to recycle old candidates when doing a search, whether it's management or executive recruiting firms. And we know, given the 8% statistic, that the people at the top are male, so you're recycling old male candidates if you don't do the original research. And these are some of the sort of biases and barriers that women face moving forward in order to try and progress. But as I said, there are some very, very encouraging signs, and we could speak to those as well.
But the score is still pretty pathetic, isn't it? I mean, you looked at more than 500 named executive officers. These are the top paid executives at big companies. Less than 1 in 10 was a woman.
But I believe that there is some inertia. If you look at the fact that 60% of university graduates are now female, if you look at the fact that 50% of our workforce is now female, and if you look at the fact, for example, that 50% of the provincial premiers are now female, representing 87% of the population, coupled with the fact that we have now doubled the numbers, I feel that despite the fact the numbers are low, the inertia is going to continue, and the speed of change, although from a corporate point of view, it's been slower than the other paces of change, I think it'll speed up, and we choose to look at the glasses being half full rather than half empty.
Nyla, I want to ask you about this, because a lot of people have been talking about Sheryl Sandberg, the CEO of Facebook's new book that's coming out called Lean In. And she said that we women hold ourselves back by lacking self-confidence, by not raising our hands instead of and stepping back. How do you feel about those comments? Have you seen that?
Of course. I mean, I think that it is true for a wide range of reasons that women and girls early on are not playing to win as much as boys are. And I do think that over time that manifests in the workplace, that you may not go as aggressively for, your name being put forth for a job or whatever. But I think that when I look at my daughter, who is 11, and I see her playing hockey, and I see her growing up with very different rules for boys and girls, not the same rigid ones that I grew up with. I hope, like Jay, I am hopeful that, in the future, she will approach her workplace with very different attitudes that I did.
You think just in your lifetime there's been a change?
I absolutely think it's absolutely tremendous, and it's also driven by parents. And if I look at the way I parent, I'm very conscious of this. And if I have a daughter, I do certain things with greater intent to make sure that she is in her own mind believing that she's entitled to different opportunities and that she has the skills and she should just go for it. So I think that, the wind is blowing in a bit of a different direction. While the progress may seem, numerically to be slight, I think that beneath all of that, there is lots of momentum moving in the right direction.
What do you think corporations need to do to support women in these executive roles?
It starts with awareness. I mean, I think that, if in any corporation, everybody that comes to work every day is really motivated by making the company perform the best that it could perform. I do think that, as Jay was saying, if you look at the numbers where 50% of your talent pool is female, and in your actual corporation you have a lot of female, just from a talent agenda, you should make sure that you are moving that talent as quickly and as aggressively as you can. The women don't have the same opportunities as you get higher in the organization. So I think awareness is starting is the first step, and we see organizations like Catalyst, we see large companies like Deloitte that are putting programs in place. Even in Rogers, we have the Rogers Women's Network, which has been around for 10 years. I would say the past 24 months has been when there's been a lot more momentum and awareness within the corporation itself as to what role a group like the Rogers Women can play to help the company perform better.
Jay, you run a global recruitment firm. When you bring a woman candidate to a prospective employer, do you sometimes hear a kind of, or just get the body language, no, we don't want to go there?
Well, that's actually, that's an excellent question. That's one of the reasons I feel so optimistic, because I haven't seen that. And we're working currently for some of the world's largest corporations. We're doing board searches for some of the largest corporations internationally. And they're all asking me to keep an eye on diversity, in fact. Study after study has shown, forget the moral issue or the moral imperative at this point, which is the most important piece of it, but study after study has shown that the greater the diversity at the top echelons of corporate Canada or corporate United States or corporate Europe, the greater the results. Time and time again, companies have shown that the greater diversity, the greater amount of creativity, the greater the amount of perspectives at the top, the greater the results.
And I thought you raised an important point in your report as well, and that is as we see more diversity on the boards, on the board level, that you'll actually see more women being promoted to leadership roles.
Well, there's an absolute trickle-down effect. The more women at the top, the greater the remedy of this issue. Because that creates role models for future women. So it's more women at the top, which we're seeing. It's not legislation like some may have suggested. That's a remedy of last resort. It's education, social awareness, corporate commitment by companies such as Bell and Rogers. And at the end of the day, with all of this inertia we're seeing, I feel we won't get to 50%, and 50% might not be the right number, but 8 to 10% is for sure off at the same time.
I think also when you look at, you raised Sheryl Sandberg, but when you look at different ecosystems, for example, in the Silicon Valley, tech-based companies, you see a high percentage of women in leadership roles. You see a lot of women that are starting their own companies. And, it's worth looking at that model because also when technology is an equalizer. When you teach someone how to code, you teach someone how to code, whether you're teaching a male or female. So there's a generation, too, where it's really about, you going out there with confidence and doing what you believe in. And so you see that more and more women are actively participating and driving growth. But really, I think it's because that is an ecosystem that's based on innovation. And so if they want their companies to succeed, they're going to make sure that every possible idea, every possible perspective is voiced and that it's taken into consideration. Yeah. And I think that's a really good example.
I can't think of an equivalent, though, to a female equivalent to Mark Zuckerberg or Sergey Brin yet.
No, but if you look at Marissa Mayer and what she's doing at Yahoo and what she's been doing at Google.
She was brought in to turn around a company.
Yes.
While 2 months pregnant.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Well, thank you both for coming in. Very interesting perspective.
Thank you.
Our pleasure.
That was Nyla Ahmad, Vice President of Local Digital and Rogers Ventures, and Jay Rosenzweig. He's the founder and CEO of Rosenzweig and Company.